I never thought I'd be the type to fall for the classic "he's the one" story, but I did. Josh was everything I ever wanted: kind, funny, dependable. We met in college and he seemed to genuinely care. I remember the first time he kissed me, soft, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. It felt like a promise. We moved in together after 2 years and everything looked perfect. Or so I thought. One evening I told him I was pregnant. I sat on our tiny kitchen stool, heart pounding, voice trembling. "Josh, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant." His face lit up and he pulled me into a hug, whispering how everything would be fine. I felt relief flood through me. We'd planned this. It felt like a new beginning. The first red flags were subtle, though. He started working late more often, long hours, always excuses about work. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just a busy season. But then I noticed his phone was always face down when he was home, and sometimes he'd get a little defensive when I asked about his day. It was small enough that I brushed it off, telling myself I was just paranoid. I was pregnant after all. My hormones were probably messing with my head. A few months later, I began feeling the distance. He was less present, more distracted. One night I saw him on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I noticed a message notification pop up from a number I didn't recognize. My stomach clenched. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I snuck over, glanced at the screen, and froze. Message read: "Can't wait to see you tonight, missed you so much." My heart hammered. It was from someone named Emma, a woman. It wasn't just a friend, I could tell from the tone. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold sweat break out. My hands trembled. Something was wrong. I made a mental note then and there. This was not just late work nights or innocent friendship. There was something else going on. I had no proof, but the feeling gnawed at me. Over the next few weeks, the signs piled up. I found lipstick on his shirt collar that wasn't mine. A strange, unfamiliar scent on his clothes. His phone was always hidden, even when he was sitting right next to me. I'd catch him brushing his fingers nervously against his phone, as if trying to hide something. I started checking the messages, looking for clues. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know. Every little thing felt like pieces of a puzzle I was desperate to solve. Then came the day I found the messages. I had taken his phone when he was in the shower, just to see if I could catch anything more. I wasn't planning to snoop, but I was desperate. I scrolled through his texts, heart pounding like a drum. There were dozens of messages from Emma, flirty, suggestive, sometimes outright explicit. The tone was intimate, too close for just friends. They even planned to meet up, saying things like "can't wait to hold you again" and "tonight's the night I've been waiting for." I felt my stomach turn to stone. My palms went cold and clammy, and a dull ache spread across my chest. I stared at the screen, feeling numb and furious at the same time. I'd been an idiot, ignoring all those tiny signs. Now I had proof. My life was a lie, and I didn't even know how long this had been going on. I looked at the messages again, trying to process the betrayal. What do you do when the person you trusted most has been lying right in front of you? I wondered if I'd been blind or just hoping I was wrong. But there it was, the truth, staring me in the face. I couldn't unsee it. And I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let this slide. Not without a fight, not without some kind of plan. I just needed to figure out what that plan was going to be. And I knew deep down that I wasn't walking away quietly. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around the messages, Emma's name popping up like a ghost. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, smirking, maybe teasing, probably feeling just as betrayed as I did. I felt sick, like my stomach was twisting into knots. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I clenched my fists so tight I thought my nails might cut into my palms. I kept asking myself, how long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? I found myself replaying moments I'd dismissed: his late nights, his hesitation when I asked about his phone, the strange looks he threw around the house. All those tiny signs suddenly made sense. He'd been lying from the start. I felt so stupid, so naive, but I wasn't just angry. I was seething with this cold, simmering rage. It wasn't just about the betrayal, it was the fact that I had trusted him with everything. My body, my future, our life. And he'd thrown it all away for some meaningless affair. I kept thinking about how Emma had probably been in our bed, sharing our space, smiling at me in photos, and I'd never known. It made my skin crawl. I knew I had to do something. Sitting there in the dark, I decided I wouldn't confront him immediately. Not without a plan. If I was going to do this, it had to be smart. I had to hit back without making it too obvious. I had to make him feel like I was in control, even if I felt like I was falling apart inside. The first step was gathering evidence. I needed proof that was undeniable. I remembered the messages from Emma. I thought about how they'd planned to meet again. I needed to see if there was more texts, photos, anything. My mind raced. I knew his email was connected to his phone. I decided I'd check his email the next day just to be safe. No more hiding. I'd find everything I could. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your nerves itch. I waited until he was in the shower, then quietly slipped into his office. His laptop was sitting open on the desk. I hesitated for a second, then moved closer. My fingers fumbled over the keyboard as I logged in, knowing it was risky but desperate. What I found was almost worse than I expected. Tons of messages, more from Emma, some from other women, proof of a pattern I hadn't even imagined. I saw photos he'd sent and received, some that made my stomach churn. There was one email chain titled "Next Meeting," with details about where they were supposed to meet. I printed everything I found. When he stepped out of the shower, I was already back in the bedroom, clutching the printouts. My heart pounded like a drum. I couldn't believe how easy it was to uncover his secrets. I felt a strange mixture of empowerment and disgust. I'd caught him red-handed. Now I knew how deep this went. Later that day, I confronted him. I sat him down, my voice cold. "Who is Emma?" I asked flatly. His face went pale immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. I slapped the papers down on the table. "Don't lie. I have your emails, your texts. Is Emma the reason you've been so distant? The reason you've been lying?" His shoulders slumped and he looked so defeated I almost felt sorry for him, almost. He finally broke, mumbling something about mistakes and confusion, but I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. That's when I realized I had to do something drastic. This wasn't just about catching him in the act. It was about protecting myself and making him pay. I started drafting a plan, one that would hit him where it hurt without breaking into chaos, one that would make him regret ever crossing me. I knew I wasn't going to forgive him easily, but I had a taste of power now, and I wasn't about to let him walk away. I looked at him sitting there, guilty and quiet, and I knew one thing for sure. I'd be leaving soon, but not before making him realize what he'd lost. I had to think bigger. I had to make him feel the burn of betrayal in a way he'd never forget, and I'd figure out how to do that, just as soon as I sorted through everything I'd uncovered. Over the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time I looked at him, I saw a stranger, a man I'd loved, turned into someone I didn't recognize. That betrayal had cut so deep it felt like a wound I couldn't bandage. I knew I had to get revenge, but I didn't want to do it impulsively. This had to be calculated, precise. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd done, not just for me but for myself. I wasn't going to let this slide. I kept going over the evidence I'd gathered, trying to figure out what would hurt him the most. It wasn't just the lies, the betrayal. It was the fact that he'd violated the trust we built. I'd trusted him with everything, and he'd thrown it all away for what? A quick affair. An ego boost. I wanted him to realize the damage he'd caused. One thing was clear. I had to cut him loose, but I wasn't going to do it quietly. I wanted to make it sting. I planned to leak the messages and photos I'd found, carefully, so it wouldn't be obvious that I was responsible. I'd send them anonymously to a few of his close friends and family, just enough for them to see what kind of man he was. Maybe then he'd understand that I wasn't going to let him get away with it. But I also had a more personal plan, something to make him feel the hurt directly. I decided I'd remove his access to everything, bank accounts, social media, the keys to our house. I'd make him feel powerless, like a man who lost everything he thought was secure. That would be my revenge, that feeling of control, of making him see that I could destroy what little he had left. And I'd do it without crossing into the realm of violence, just sharp, calculated moves. One evening I sat him down again. This time I handed him an envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of the most damning messages between him and Emma, along with some of his emails. his face drained of color. "What is this?" he asked, voice trembling. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, waiting for him to realize what I'd done. You're blackmailing me," he blurted, eyes darting. "No, I'm just showing you what you left behind," I said coldly. "You want to keep lying to yourself, fine, but I'm done. I'm done being your fool." He looked like he wanted to argue, to deny everything again, but I saw the hopelessness in his eyes. It was the first time I saw him truly realize I wasn't going to be a pushover anymore, that I was capable of making him feel the pain he'd caused me. My plan was in motion now. I was ready to take the next step, expose him, cut him off entirely, and walk away with whatever dignity I had left. I knew I'd be better off without him, but that didn't mean I had to go. Quietly, I was going to make damn sure he remembered this betrayal for the rest of his life, and when I finally left that house, I'd be free, free of the lies, the pain, and the broken trust. I looked at him one last time before I left the room. "Don't contact me again," I said firmly. "You've lost me and you'll never get me back." As I grabbed my keys, I felt a strange mix of relief and defiance. I was finally taking control, and that was the only victory I needed. That night I packed a bag, just the essentials, enough to leave and never look back. My hands trembled, not from fear but from a strange sense of liberation. I'd spent so long feeling helpless, like I was drowning in his lies, but now I finally had the upper hand. Every step I took out of that house felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for months. Before I left, I made sure to do one last thing. I set up everything so that he'd believe I'd just gone for a walk or gone to a friend's place. I knew I'd need to be careful. The last thing I wanted was for him to suspect what I was really up to. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to clear my head. Don't try to contact me." Nothing more, just enough to make him wonder. Walking out of that house, I felt my skin crawl with a mixture of adrenaline and fear. I had no idea what he'd do next. Would he try to reach me? Would he just sit there, stunned, knowing I'd finally found out everything? The air was cold that evening, the sky dark, and the street seemed unnervingly quiet. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, feeling the cool breeze brush against my face. My plan was simple. I'd stay with a friend for a few days, gather my thoughts, then decide what to do about the next steps. But I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not yet. I had the evidence, I had the power, and I had no intention of going quietly into the night. I'd made sure he knew I was done. The betrayal had cut too deep for anything to simply go back to normal. As I drove away, I remembered. The last thing I'd said to him: "You've lost me." The words felt heavy, like a stone in my stomach, but they also felt like a victory. I was finally reclaiming my life piece by piece. It was over, yet I knew I'd carry the scars for a while. Still, I promised myself that I wouldn't let this define me. I'd rebuild, stronger than ever. That night I lay on a different bed, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. My mind was racing, thinking about everything, trying to figure out how I'd move forward. I knew I'd have to cut all ties, start fresh, and rebuild my trust in myself. I wasn't just leaving him. I was leaving behind the pain, the lies, the betrayal. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but also the most necessary. In that moment, I realized something important. No matter how much it hurts now, I deserved better. I deserved honesty, loyalty, and trust. And I was finally ready to find it somewhere else. Somewhere I could truly be myself, without the shadows of his betrayal hanging over me. Next step, I was going to contact the lawyer and start divorce proceedings. Enough was enough. I was done feeling small, betrayed, and powerless. Time to take back control. And I knew deep down that this was the beginning of my real recovery. A few days after I left, I started taking concrete steps. The first was finding a good lawyer. I didn't want to drag things out or give him a chance to spin it differently. I wanted this over as cleanly and swiftly as possible. I scheduled a consultation, poring over the legal options, knowing I had the evidence to back up my case. It was a strange relief, holding those printed messages and emails, knowing I finally had proof of his betrayal. While waiting for the paperwork to process, I also made some emotional moves. I blocked him everywhere: social media, phone, email. I didn't want to see his name or hear his voice again. Every notification from him was a reminder of what I'd lost, and I refused to let him creep back into my head. I realized how much energy I'd spent trying to justify his actions, trying to make sense of it all. Now, I was focused only on me. The thing that kept me going was the thought of him realizing I had the upper hand. I knew he'd try to reach out, try to manipulate the situation, but I was prepared. I'd set up a secure email account to handle all official communications, and I was ready to hand over the evidence to my lawyer. I wanted to make sure that, once the process was in motion, he'd understand he'd lost control. I wasn't going to be manipulated or guilted back into silence. One day, he finally did try to contact me. A text message popped up. "Please talk to me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to go this far." My stomach clenched, but I kept my response simple. "I have nothing more to say. Leave me alone." It felt good to finally shut that door. Seeing that message, I realized how desperate he was, how much he was trying to claw his way back. But I wasn't interested. I was done giving him the power. Now I was working on healing. I reached out to friends, family, anyone who could support me through this mess. Every day I felt a little stronger. The betrayal was still there, but I refused to let it define me. I was finally reclaiming my life piece by piece. I started focusing on myself, my health, my future, my happiness. It wasn't easy and some days felt worse than others, but I was determined. I also started analyzing everything. How I'd missed the signs, how I'd been so blind to his lies, but I didn't dwell on guilt. Instead, I used it as fuel. Next, I planned what I wanted from here. I decided I'd file for divorce, get a fresh start, and cut all ties. I wanted him to know that I was done, that I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. The last thing I did that sealed my resolve was handing over the keys to our house, my house now, to a lawyer. I wanted to make it clear I was reclaiming my space. No more shared lives, no more betrayal. I was taking back what was mine. The feeling of physically holding the keys, dropping them into the lawyer's hands, was oddly freeing. It wasn't just about property or a house. It was about reclaiming my independence. That moment holding those keys was like a final act of defiance. I had been hurt so badly, but I was still standing. I was still strong. I knew I'd be okay. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I'd learned to trust myself again and know that I deserved better than being lied to and betrayed. Next step, I was going to focus on rebuilding my life, one day at a time. But for now, I had officially closed that chapter, and I was finally ready to move forward. In the days that followed, I felt a strange mixture of relief and empowerment. The house was quiet now, empty of his presence, and I finally had the space to breathe. I'd handed over the keys, filed for divorce, and cut all ties. Every step felt like a small victory, proof that I wasn't going to be a victim of his betrayal anymore. I could finally see a future beyond the tears, the anger, the heartbreak. I spent those first few nights sleeping better than I had in months. No more tossing and turning, no more feeling like I was waiting for the next lie to come crashing down on me. I'd taken control, and I'd started rebuilding. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I felt stronger, more aware, less willing to ignore the red flags next time. Looking back, I realized how much I'd let myself ignore. The late nights, the evasiveness, the strange glances, they all meant something. I was blinded by hope, by love, by that naive belief that everything would work out. But I was wrong. And I'm glad I found out in time before I got even more hurt. Part of me still feels the sting of betrayal. There are moments when I wonder if I could have done something differently, if I should have seen the signs sooner or pushed harder to get answers. But honestly, I don't regret any of it. What I regret is wasting so much time pretending everything was okay instead of trusting my gut. That's the real lesson. Now I'm focused on healing. I'm reconnecting with friends who stood by me, rediscovering hobbies I'd abandoned, and setting new goals. I refuse to let this define me or turn me into someone bitter. Instead, I choose to see it as a painful but necessary chapter, one that taught me my worth, my strength, and my resilience. And here's what I want anyone reading this to understand. Betrayal cuts deep, but it can also be the catalyst for reclaiming your power. Don't ignore the signs, and don't be afraid to walk away when you know something's wrong. Trust yourself first, because in the end, no one is more loyal to your happiness than you are. So I close this chapter with a simple piece of advice. Never settle for less than you deserve. Keep your standards high, listen to your instincts, and don't be afraid to start over. Because sometimes losing everything is the only way to truly find yourself.